Welcome to episode 50 of Military Veterans Podcast, where we talk to veterans to learn about their stories and experiences. And today we're joined by Bob Stark. Hey, Bob.
Hey, Gav.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Thanks.
Cool.
How are you?
I'm doing all right, mate. I'm doing all right. It's been a busy week for me. I shared that stuff with you before we recorded, and I'm not going to repeat it on here, but yeah, it's been busy. But Bob Stark, also known as Robert, is that right? That's your real name?
That's right.
Yeah, cool. That will become apparent later why we want to know what your real name is. But Bob, it's been great to have you on the show. It's not been too long getting it in the works, but yeah, excited to have you on, mainly for a few reasons. One, because I'm really interested to learn basically have your journey recorded. But you are currently in the US, aren't you? Because you're a US man, yeah?
That's right. If you consider Alaska part of the US.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do. It's a state, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So this is the longest or biggest time difference ever on the show. 9 hours behind the UK, I think. Is that right?
I think that is right, yeah.
Yeah. So it's like just the beginning of your day and now it's the end of mine. Not only that, this is episode 50, which is an amazing number. Crazy that we're at half a century of episodes. But this does round out year 4. So you are like the finale of year 4 of Military Veterans Podcast. How cool is that?
I'm honored. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's going to be a good recording. I can feel it. So let's dive in with the 4 questions that we have at the beginning of every episode. Bullet point answer, and then we'll dive into your recording. So 4 questions. I'll give you them all at once. See if you can handle it. So they are: when did you join? What service and branch did you join? How long did you serve for? And what rank did you get to?
I joined May 29th, 2002. I was in the United States Army as an airborne infantryman. I was a specialist, and I was in the military for 4 years.
Nice. Well done for remembering it all. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. Yeah, really excited to hear kind of like why you chose that certain part of the military, and just your background. So to start off with, let's rewind the clock. Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
I was born in Caldwell, Idaho, in July 17th, 1984, and I moved from Idaho down to California with my mother and my father and my brother. And I believe we lived in California in a trailer on an oil rig area. I lived there. The story is kind of skewed, but I believe I moved from there to Nome, Alaska when I was anywhere from 3 months old to a year old.
Okay.
And so I lived in Nome, Alaska, which is in the far north, the Arctic Circle, until I was 8. And then I moved from Nome to Eagle River, which is kind of a suburb of Anchorage. And I lived there until I was a freshman in high school, which was about 13. And then I moved from there to a small fishing town in south central Alaska called Seward, Alaska. And I lived there until I was 17 when I joined the Army.
Okay. So quite a bit of moving around, and not just down the road either. Like there's some distance between locations, right?
Definitely.
So what's a standout kind of moment? Was there stuff that you really enjoyed doing as a kid? And maybe which area you enjoyed the most out of those 4 locations?
Yeah, definitely. When I was a little boy and I lived in Nome, Nome is famous for having endless coastline. And so I lived in a house that was probably 2 blocks or, a couple football fields away from the beach. And we had a 4-wheeler. So we would either ride the 4-wheeler over to the beach and just walk or ride along that beach for hours and hours, or we would walk over there, me and my brother as little kids, and we would just run all over that beach. So Nome was perfect for a child, a little boy like me who just wanted to play outside. I would fish on the Bering Sea area there. there were little rivers, mouths of rivers we would fish in. And so it was just endless time playing on the beach, watching the animals, seeing walruses that had been poached on the beach, and just growing up there with that salty air in my bones. And I think maybe it made me kind of a salty guy, but those were some of my favorite memories as a boy in Nome. And then when I moved to Eagle River, it was baseball and skateboarding. So I lived for baseball and skateboarding every day outside again, whether it was skating all over the town, learning new tricks, or playing on the baseball teams. And in winter, I'd skate in the garage, or we'd catch the bus from Eagle River out to Anchorage, where we'd skate in parking garages. And those were definitely the highlights then. And then when I moved to Seward, the highlights were, well, I won't lie, there weren't too many highlights when I moved to Seward. I guess the friendships. I gained really close bonds with people when I lived there because I was going through some tumultuous times as a family. And so I really bonded on to people in the way that I did in the military through hardships.
Ah, that's cool. That's cool. It sounded like you were very active as a youngster. It also sounds like that the cold weather didn't really faze you, because that's when you started your Alaska journey, right? When you're that young.
Exactly. Yeah. Since I grew up in it, I'm married to a woman who's not from Alaska, and yeah, her family can say all day, "Oh, Missouri, it's just like Alaska." Well, it's not. So I'm hardy, I guess.
That's cool. That's cool. So with all of that in mind, yes, you joined the military, and we'll definitely discuss that shortly. But did you have an idea that you would join the military from a young age? Did you have family or friends that were in the military?
Yeah, I think there were definitely some subconscious workings that were going on while I was a child. All the males on my mother's side of the family joined the military, and some of the females were in the Army or the Air Force, no Navy, no Coast Guard. And I grew up with a mother who was married to a man in the National Guard for a number of years, living in a household with an uncle who was in the National Guard. I always played with G.I. Joes and little Army men, and always played out, like I was having a gun. I never was shooting guns as a kid. My mother wasn't for it, but then as I grew older, I did have that stepfather around, but I had, an absent father, if you will. And so there were a lot of things I didn't learn as a boy to become a man that I really didn't know where to learn them. And so it really seemed like the arrows were just leading towards joining the military. And yeah, I always thought if I was going to be in the military, I wanted to be that guy on the ground crawling with a knife in his mouth and be the infantryman. And so that's what I did.
That's cool. And what was the point in your growing up period that you set and focused to join up, and maybe knowing that you wanted to be that infantryman, as you mentioned, but at what point was you like, cool, this is where I'm gonna, next year or whenever, I'm gonna join up, I'm gonna sign up?
Yeah, it was when I believe I was 16, maybe 17, as a senior, maybe a late junior in high school, when a lot of the guys I was in school with were ready to go to college, or they were going to go be a pro snowboarder or go work on a fishing boat, all these options. And at the time, I didn't see many options. I was really a young delinquent, if you will, in high school. And so I didn't focus on my studies. I barely passed. I barely graduated. And I was a serious teenage drunk. And so I was really I was always hoping for something that would help me to get out of those bad habits I was in, but I didn't seem to find any options. And so it was when I was in the high school commons, I'll never forget, I was sitting down there in the commons, and I looked up and I saw the recruiter up on the common stairs, and it was kind of like I was looking at an archangel in heaven. Like, you know, it was all shiny with all of his badges, and he was strong and confident. And I was like, wow, I want that confidence, because I'd just been hiding, you know, with red eyes down for years. And so I went up to him and I talked to him and asked him about some things in the military, and he was a professional recruiter, so he knew really how to answer. And I'm sure he was picking up on my body language and my desperation. And I just knew right off the bat, you know, he was like, oh, what would you be interested in jobs? And I just said infantry. Oh, well, you can test into other jobs if you want. And I was like, nope, I want to jump out of airplanes and I want to be a ground grunt. And so he was like, well, you can definitely do that. We need them. So yeah, that snowballed within, you know, a few months. I was taking the tests. I was in Anchorage. I was in the hotel room signing the papers. And next thing you know, it was 3 days after I graduated. There I was in basic training. So
wow,
those were the things that really stood out.
Just a question on the, you said about the airborne infantry. Did you see something, or did you watch a movie or anything like that wanted it to be airborne and not just like a standard infantry? Not saying they're standard, by the way. Just anybody listening, that you're still good.
I'll still call them legs. That's what we call them in the airborne.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Okay.
We call them dirty, nasty legs. You know, and no offense. It was just what, you know, that kind of brotherhood camaraderie. But either way, I can't say there was any movie. I just knew that there were people in the military who jumped out of airplanes and helicopters. And then there were also infantrymen who rode in tanks and weren't really on their feet patrolling. And I guess because I've always been a skateboarder and a snowboarder, I like adrenaline. I like activity. The thought of just sitting in a tank and not being able to jump out of airplanes, like, I just knew if there was an option to jump, man, I wanted the rush. And so that was really why.
That's cool. Did you know it was going to be like one of the harder things to get into? Like, because it's more physically demanding, right? Than with the tests and stuff, from what I know.
It's hard for me to say. It seems like everybody who went through Airborne School graduated. And yeah, I don't know. I imagine it's more physically demanding and mentally than not doing it. So yeah, I would imagine it is a little more.
Yeah. That's cool. So it sounded like, it was pretty snowballed. It snowballed fast, like you mentioned. So when you start heading off to, do you call it boot camp or basic training? What do you call it from the U.S. Army Infantry side?
My understanding is that Marines call it boot camp. I don't know what the Navy call it. Army calls it basic training. So I went to basic training.
That's cool. Yeah, we call it basic training over in the UK as well. So you're heading off. Are you excited? Are you a little bit nervous? Like you said, you were coming out of the phase of maybe being a little bit of a drunk. So you know, this is going to get you out of that hole. So what's your thoughts? What's your feelings?
Yeah, that was a really difficult time because I had two friends who we all shook hands that we were going to sign up together, do the brotherhood thing. And as it approached, I was the only one who did it. And so I started wanting to bail out. You know, I tried to push it off until the end of summer because all of a sudden I've got job opportunities on fishing boats and I've got, you know, girls interested in me. And really it was my addiction. I was so wrapped up in that daily grind of drinking, and I was afraid of going there because when I did stop, you know, I was required to stop smoking weed because I was a big weed guy. That was like my number one. I was having such a tough time because I had to stop for a certain amount of time to take the urinalysis test to get in, that I remember my mom, she had some Oxycontins from the dentist at the time. And I remember I stopped smoking weed and I was like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I was going through that turmoil of an addict getting off of something. and it was alcohol and weed, because I was like, oh, I'm going to go be in the infantry. I need to be tough. I need to train now 2 weeks before I go, not knowing anything about training. And I just started snorting those pills, man. I just didn't know what else to do. I was popping the pills, snorting the pills. So I was trying to get out of going again. I was trying and hoping they would give me a test again. And they didn't. I talked to the recruiter. He's like, nope, you're in. Like, we've already paid X amount of dollars for you. Whether these were lies or not, I really don't know. Mm-hmm. We've already paid for you to go to training. We've got the slot for you. You've got to go. And I did. I didn't run. I'm so glad I did, because it helped me so much with my life, man. But yeah, when I went to basic and I showed up there, I was that chubby little kid who was a former skater athlete who for the past couple of years hadn't done too much of it because I was too busy using intoxicants. So I remember my first PT test in basic training, the physical fitness test. I think in 2 minutes I did 3 push-ups, like 5 sit-ups, and I think I ran a 2 mile in like 25 minutes because I was so out of shape and sore. So,
but they wanted to keep you. You kept on going.
I kept going.
So something there must have, be in the back of your mind to don't give up, right?
No doubt. Yeah, I needed that structure, and I really was thankful for the masculinity side, whether it was like an unhealthy or not, I don't know. I'm not here to judge that, but I needed that in my life. And so after that first week and doing the physical fitness test and seeing like, dang, I'm really weak. I'm really unhealthy. Some of these other guys are studs. I want to be like that. That's why I joined. And so having that motivation, and, I'm kind of a gritty dude. I was like, I'm not quitting. There's no way, because there were some guys that did and they were crying, and I was like, there ain't no way I can quit. So.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And you got through, you went through basic. How long was that roughly? Do you remember roughly how long that was for?
Yeah. Basic training, if I remember correctly, was 9 weeks. And then there was 3 weeks of advanced infantry training. Not quite sure how advanced you can get in 3 weeks, but that's the way it goes. And then right after that, we were loaded into cattle cars, brought down the road to Airborne School.
Okay.
And so that was just like boom, boom, boom right after.
Fair. So from the first part, basic, was there a standout moment or something you did that you thought this is really cool? So you had that influence from the people around you to make sure you're thinking that you're in the right place to get fitter and get your head in the right place. But was there anything else? I don't know, like shooting or anything like that you thought this is cool as shit?
Yeah, of course, man. I mean, I thought throwing a grenade, I thought shooting, tons of rounds down range, getting better at that, more proficient. But really, more than anything for me was that feeling of doing that first PT test, being super weak and super out of shape, and then doing the next one and being a little stronger. Starting not being able to do a single pull-up. And every time we'd go into the dining facility, you'd have to do 6 pull-ups. And I couldn't do any. I was really not fit for it. And, as time went on, and we're only talking a few weeks, being able to see like, wow, I'm doing pull-ups. Wow, I'm doing great form push-ups, and I'm running. And by the time I was done with basic, I didn't have a perfect score, which I would get later because I really got into the physical side of it. But I was in so much better shape, and I was clean from drugs and alcohol. So I felt so clear-headed. I had friends who were healthy, which I wasn't really surrounding myself with healthy people at the time in Seward. And so all those positive inspirations and becoming a stronger, healthier, clear-headed, skilled man, which is what I wanted, all of them combined to be just transformational.
That's cool. That does sound really cool. And And if anybody out there is listening that might be where you were as a teenager, maybe hearing that is inspiration. So, you could be helping others out there. When you got to Airborne School, where is your mind at that? Because you've just done basic, you've done advanced infantry stuff, and now you're about to go down the route of learning how to jump out of a perfectly good vehicle, like an aircraft.
Yeah. I was so excited. I remember peering out the little slotted windows in that cattle car and seeing those big towers. I think they're 250-foot jump towers. And that's where they bring you up. It's 1 week is like jump tower week, and they bring you up in a parachute and then they drop you and you practice using your risers to steer. And I really felt like I was making history in a sense. I was able to be the new paratrooper. And when I got there and I realized that it's going to be a lot more of waiting, because I showed up and they had pulled a number of the guys I was with to be in the next class, but I wasn't one of them. And so then it was like, okay, you've got to wait a week until the next class starts. And so it was right back to the grind with a little more freedom, in the sense where, they don't know what to have you do. So I was out in the yard cutting the grass with scissors, and it's like, okay, why am I doing this? I've learned over the years that it had a lot to do with, humility and patience. And I learned so many skills from that. But at the time it was like, okay, all I'm doing is really trying to go to the bathroom and chew, because by that time I was chewing, and I want to do the training. And so I think I was put on hold for 3 weeks, if I remember correctly. And we had the weekends off, which was great. And we did have nights off. And so, being able to walk down to the theater and hang out with your buddies and go to a little restaurant on base and just shoot the bull, have those freedoms that we hadn't had during basic and infantry training, was huge. It made me feel like, well, I was becoming a man. I was becoming a strong, healthy man with some money in my pocket, which I wasn't used to. And then when the training started, I was like, yes, I love physical stuff. And so by that point, I really loved it because I was strong. And yeah, it was all excitement, no dread.
Awesome. What's chew mean? I think that might be an American thing.
Yeah, chew is, Copenhagen or Kodiak. It's where you take the tobacco and you put it in your lip.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, when I was out in Afghan, I was with some US guys, and they were like in the back of the vehicle, "Do you want to try this?" I don't know what it is. Well, you do this, okay? And it was disgusting. It was horrible. No wonder you're spitting for ages.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I know what you mean. So when you did maybe your first jump from that 250-foot tower, was you a little bit scared? Like, you got to be honest, or was you like, this is brilliant?
Of course. Yeah, unfortunately, the week that I was supposed to do the 250-foot tower was really windy the whole week. So I wasn't ever able to do the tower. So what I did instead was they had built kind of part of an obstacle course. It was a higher structure. I'm guessing at least 25, 35 feet. And then there was a zip line that went down that for a span, maybe 100 feet. I don't remember exactly. And so we'd climb up there, with our parachutes on and our reserves, and hook up with our carabiner to that zip line and practice exiting.
Okay. Yeah.
So we ended up doing that more than the average class that was able to do the tower. And yeah, I was a little nervous with that. I mean, you're jumping out of a structure that if that thing didn't work, I would fall and probably break a bone. But I can't say whether or not I was nervous with the tower because I never got to do it.
Okay. And then what about actually going out of a plane? Because I'm guessing you have to do that, right? That's to get your wings, I'm guessing?
That's right. Yeah. In an airborne school, you do 5 jumps. And when you get to your unit, everybody calls you a 5-jump chump. And so, yeah, you do the 5 jumps in airborne school. And of course, I was nervous. I remember the night before my first jump, I went to the movie theater And as I was walking to the movie theater, I saw a girl who I went to high school with. I was like, whoa, I couldn't believe that we had passed each other, that intersection of our lives while we were there. But either way, I went and I watched Triple X. It was a Vin Diesel movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I'm going to be like that, So I was really trying everything I could to find courage to do that thing I'd never done before. And then I remember loading up on the plane and being nervous, not like pee my pants nervous, but oh my gosh, this is something I've been hoping to do. I'm excited to do, and I'm about to go up 1,000 feet and jump out of this thing. I hope my parachute opens. And so I wasn't as nervous as the number one guy because, I was kind of toward the front of the plane. So when the doors were open, I couldn't see out the doors. It was just my buddies, me looking at my buddies in the plane, looking at my feet. And the guy who was there toward the front toward the tail of the plane where the door was, he was crying. The guy, he was the number one jumper. He ended up being asked like, okay, stand up, hook up. And he was just crying. And I remember the paratrooper instructor being like, yelling at him, trying to get him motivated, and finally asking him to just go off to the back. And so he ended up not being the number one jumper, and we all shuffled down. And so I wasn't as nervous as that, but yeah, man, I was definitely nervous.
Yeah. What's it like when you do jump out though? Is it, you just hear wind by your ears, or yeah,
basically it was that initial rush for me was always that free fall, which is only 4 seconds, if that, and so it's that jump. And first of all, okay, I didn't hit the side of the plane because that's what they talked to you about. My riser didn't get caught up around my neck or around my body or my gear. Check, I'm good there. And now my parachute opens. And after the parachute opened, it was like, okay, I'm good. I mean, I don't care how I hit the ground. I'm not going to fall to my death. And so those initial 4 seconds were definitely that, like, the biggest rush for me.
Yeah.
And then it is all, hearing the wind. And it was kind of for me, it was very peaceful. It's like that acceptance of, I don't know what's going to happen. I can steer a tiny bit this way, a tiny bit that way, but I just need to keep my feet and knees together when I hit the ground, keep my body tight. Other than that, I've got no control. So it was really nice, man.
Cool. I know you say it's nice and peaceful, and it probably sounds like it could be, but I'm never doing it. I'm never doing it. So when you get to your first, do you call it station? Do you call it camp? What would you call it? Your first deployment? Well, I'm guessing that's more military, like more war-y, isn't it? But
that's right. Yeah, we call it duty station.
Duty. We call it duty, I think. Duty is British. Duty. So when you get to your first duty station, you're a 5-jump chump. How do you feel when you go in there? Because it's a new thing now.
Yeah, I felt excited. Again, my first duty station was Italy. And so as a small town Alaskan boy,
No way.
Yeah. that was my number one thing. I told the recruiter I wanted to go to Italy, and it ended up working out where Italy was ramping up their forces. And so they were taking in hundreds of new recruits. And I was one of them who ended up getting my duty station of choice. And so, man, I was so excited to get to Italy, to visit the cities, to train, to find some brothers that I could, bond with. And when I got there, I was really surprised that it was kind of like basic training again. Right off the bat, I show up and I'm the brand new recruit chump. And so, being targeted by especially the young sergeants who were like trying to be tough and make a name for themselves and do this, do that, it's like, okay, that was tough for me to deal with, being that I thought I was like, well, I graduated, all these things, like, why are you treating me like this? But as I got more training while I was there, and more experience, I started seeing like, okay, I really didn't know much at all coming here. And it was a way to put me in my place and humble me again. And it was only a few weeks really before they started seeing that I wasn't a dirtbag. I was a hardworking, pretty intelligent guy who could pick up the trainings, who if I didn't learn something, I'd do it over and over and over until I was proficient. And I took my physical training very seriously. And so, you know, after a few weeks, it was, okay, this dude's going to be a young stud. And so then they started treating me differently and finding those guys who weren't really as capable, I guess you could say, as I was, or willing at the time. And so, yeah, man, that's kind of how that was. And I remember going to my first training exercise, and we were riding the bus, you know, out through the Italian cities. And it was so cool because we would run every morning, and we'd leave the base and we'd run down these streets where, you know, the aromas were in the air, and these Italian people are cleaning the cobblestone streets, and there's bakeries opening up and cafes, and we'd be running down those old cobblestone streets up to these old cathedrals and looking out at the city. And it was some of the coolest experiences of my life, running those streets in the early morning. But when I went out to do my first training exercise, I remember it was at that point where I realized, oh my God, basic training, it gave me basic training, but here I am, like, I don't know how to use night vision goggles. I don't know how to walk with them because there's no depth perception, how to do live fire exercises. It was back to those nerves, like, oh my God, this is all new and I'm anxious. And am I going to be able to perform like they want me to perform? Or am I going to choke under pressure? And so, yeah, man, all that, it was all so exciting.
So whereabouts was that in Italy, and what's the unit called?
Yeah, it was in Vicenza, Italy is the name of the city, and the base was called Caserma Ederle, or Camp Ederle, and the unit I was with was 173rd Airborne Brigade, 1st of 508. They have another one that's like 2nd of 503rd, but I was 1st of 508 there at 173rd in Italy.
Oh, nice. I've heard of that before from other people. It's so not well known. What's the right word? It's people respect it. Yeah. 1st of 508. I think they do, from what I've heard. So so you've done some training. You're getting your head in the game. You're building up confidence, learning new things like night vision. And then do you have your first main task away, or what's the kind of like next stepping stone for you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, not to try to go back, but one of the biggest things for me was in basic, I was trained with an M4 or an M16. And so I became pretty proficient at that. But when I got to my unit, in our teams, you know, there's a rifleman, the M4 holds the M4. There's a saw gunner who holds the squad automatic weapon, the machine gun, and there's a grenadier. And I was a grenadier. And so all of a sudden, you know, I felt like I was proficient with the M4, but I was assigned as the grenadier, which during those training exercises, I was to use my tube and to launch illuminary rounds, you know. So if we're out there and it's nighttime and the firefight ends, or we need some light for the firefight, it's like Stark, illuminary round. And so then I'd pop the illuminary round. And I remember that new set of nerves and skills, learning how to use that rifle or that grenade launcher. And so I was in Italy, I believe in November is when I was sent to Italy, November of 2002. And probably toward the end of February. Now, this is after 9/11. So it seems that a person who watched the news and was kind of savvy with what was going on in the world maybe would have picked up on some signs of what things were leading to. But I didn't. I was just, 100% focused on what was right in front of me. And And it was in February that we started getting the, not threats, but warnings, if you will, that we might be going to Iraq. Like this thing might happen. So you guys need to be ready. And so we started doing more trainings, more mount trainings or close quarter battle, more within small buildings, you know? So we were doing a lot of practicing of kicking down doors, entering and clearing buildings. And that became what we did on a regular basis, working in our teams, in our squads, at those little buildings there on base, and then going to other base. I can't remember the name of that one, training facility that was an Italian training facility where there would be, you know, a whole small town. And so we were doing that from probably January, February, getting really intense training with that and always being warned that, hey, this might be happening. And so one day it was like, okay, we're going. And then the next day, we're not going. And that high and low of preparing mentally while not knowing what we were in for. And then it was the middle of March, probably, where we were told we're going. And we are packing our duffel bags and we're packing our rucksacks and we're taking your phones because you can't tell anybody that we're going. And still, because we had been going back and forth for those month or two, we were all like, it's not happening. Whatever. But then it kept escalating. This is happening. And this is where we're going. This is what our mission's going to be. And we started having those real conversations and trainings of this is what it's going to be like. And so I think it was around March 23rd or so, we got real serious. And then it was like, okay, you know, they were keeping it hush so it wasn't leaked out until then. And then it became, you soldiers who live off base aren't leaving. Okay. We're staying here and we're going to Iraq. So
Can you remember what age you were at that point?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was 18.
Yeah. So an 18-year-old just turned an adult technically, and you're about to go to war. So when it became real, when you realized that it was no longer going to be stand down, what's your mindset there?
Yeah, that was, I guess I keep going back to the excitement. It was exciting. It was scary. It was unknown. The mystery of the military experience was probably something that really stuck with me more than anything. And is probably one of my biggest challenges now as someone who lives this day-to-day off-grid, feed the animals. It's like, okay, there's not much mystery. But at that time, I don't think I really realized what was happening until we were all up in Aviano. It's called Aviano Air Force Base in Italy. We were shipped up that way. I can't remember if it was buses or trains, but next thing I know, we're in Aviano and they've got the 10 aircraft, C-10s, on the runway. I think there were more, but I remember the 10 because there were 10 chalks of us. And boom, we're there. Our rucksacks are there. Our live weapons have been issued to us with ammunition, including my grenade vest. And there's over 1,000 of us that are on this airfield, on the flight line, really packing our rucksacks, being given mortar rounds to put into our rucks, just getting as much as we can into those rucksacks as possible. And there was still a lot of talk amongst all of us that were like, okay, this isn't going to happen. We're going to be back home in Italy in a couple of days. This is all just a scare. But as that day turned into night and they brought us to the dining facility where we ate like kings because we were going to Iraq, and the colonel came and gave the speech of, like you see on the movies, we're going to war speech. We all started realizing this might actually really happen. And then we slept that night in the hangar on cots, and still we were like, okay, is this not? Who knows? But then that next day, when we went back to that airfield and our rucks were there and the talk was still happening, it started being real. And when we put our parachutes on and put our rucksacks on and said goodbye to the guys who weren't jumping, and we started walking, waddling, if you will, up into the tail of those airplanes, there was still a little thought of, we're probably going to turn back around. But the majority was, holy shit, I'm about to parachute. My sixth jump, my cherry is going to be popped, is what they call it. And I'm going to parachute into Iraq. And I don't know if there's going to be people shooting at me. I don't know what the hell is about to happen, but this is happening. That was like, whew.
Yeah. And you probably don't remember this, but I'm guessing it's a few hours to get from that location, right, to head over to where you jump. So do you remember that at all?
Oh yeah. That was full of nerves. You know, maybe I napped, maybe I didn't, but I remember loading onto the plane and there was a big American flag hung kind of where the cockpit was of the pilots, and looking at that flag and thinking to myself, Alan Jackson, my favorite country singer, who wrote Where Were You When the World Stopped Turning, all about 9/11, is going to be so proud of me. My mom, my dad, my family, they're going to be so proud of me. What I'm doing is honorable. And walking up there and sitting down in that webbed seat, and everybody was quiet at that point. When the tail, I forget what you call it, the ramp lifted up and the door closed and we're covered in sweat and chewing and spitting all over the place, that the nerves, the memories, the thoughts of what my buddies are doing in Seward in March, which is winter in Alaska, what my mother was doing. She was living in Arizona at the time, married to a man in prison. My brother was in prison at the time, and I was picturing my brother, who's tough, what he's going through, my mother, all of these people. And I was really trying to escape while also see that what I was doing was honorable, you know, really trying to validate myself. And then as we lifted up, everybody was just yelling war cries, you know, yeah. And it was that adrenaline. And when we leveled out, it started silencing down again. And people were going into their own heads. Some of the men had, you know, their rosaries and they were praying Hail Marys and the Lord's Prayer. Others were trying to whisper to the guy next to them, but you can't hear much, you know. But it was really each man, some with their eyes closed, some eyes open, within ourselves as it was getting colder. Maybe it wasn't. As we climbed, it was getting colder. But as we were flying from Italy down south there to Iraq. And so I can't remember if we were in the air for 30 minutes, 5 hours. It really did seem like we lifted up and we were there. But I know it took some time. And I remember when those lights came on near the doors, because that's what happens. You know, it goes, there's no lights on, and then all of a sudden the lights are red. And that's telling you we're getting close. And those lights came on, and it was like, holy shit, man, we are really about to parachute in. Nobody knew how long we would be there. You know, we were talking about like, oh, we're just going to go to find Saddam or to fight the Republican Guard, and then we're going to leave. It's only going to be a couple weeks. And so we only had our summer gear because we also thought it was going to be warm. So we packed our summer sleeping bags, our summer BDUs or battle dress uniforms. It was all summer stuff. And so there was so much unknown, including when I jump out of this plane, are people going to be shooting at us?
Wow. That's crazy and incredible. So I really want to hear the rest of this story now, because when I would travel to Iraq or Afghanistan or Kuwait or wherever on a Herc, yeah, it gets colder as you go up. And then as you come down, you can feel the heat of the desert. You can feel it. And you don't know if you're going to get shot at just by a plane. And now you're going to be jumping out of a plane as an individual. So very different feeling. Like I was nervous just landing in an actual vehicle, an airplane. But you're doing this as an individual. So that red light comes on. Talk us through this. Doors open, I'm guessing. Yeah, what can you share?
Yeah, my memory may be faded over the years. So if I share the events in a way that isn't actually the way it works regarding parachuting out, forgive me because it's been years. But my memory serves that the light came on. We hooked up our rucksacks, or our rucksacks were on our laps, and they weighed well over 100 pounds, which I don't know what that is in kilos, but we were weighted down. Everybody was sweaty. You know, I mean, I had sweat running from my helmet down to my boots. And when they say stand up, hook up, because that's what they say, stand up, hook up. And we all struggled to stand and hook up. That sweat that was really pooling in my lower area just was running straight down. Whew, it was like, oh my God. And then I think there's a call that says doors open, and the doors opened and that wind hit. And that was like, oh, wow. And I was in the 10th chalk, which was the last plane of all the planes that flew over. And so in the back of my mind was also that fear that was, if they lock on to the planes with surface to air missiles, they're more than likely going to lock onto the last one. Or if there's ground troops on the ground and they're watching us, they're going to lock onto the last one. Or I'm going to get shot, or I'm not going to get shot. They're going to overshoot the landing zone, and I'm going to end up way past where I want to be. And so those things were going through the head. But more than anything, it was like, oh my God, this air is coming in. It feels so nice. But we're really about to jump out. We're almost there. And then the plane started descending from 2,500 or whatever it was down to 500, because that's what we jumped at. Normally you jump at 1,000 feet, 1,250 or so. But because it was considered a attack operation, we went down to 500. And so as we were descending, all of the weight from our rucks was lifted off of our shoulders, off our backs. And I remember everybody just stretching and being like, oh, you know, that sigh of relief for those few moments until we hit flat again. And then when that red light, you know, first of all, the number one jumper was pulled up into the door, and he's standing there looking out, and it's pitch black darkness. And, you know, my rifle is on my side in a carrying case, my grenade launcher and my M4. It's digging into me. My back's hurting. Everything's hurting. But that door's open and that jumper's right there in the number one position looking out. And then when that green light hit and it was go, 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 we move forward as fast as you can physically move with that much weight and shuffling. And then boom, turned out and tried to jump, because you're taught to jump as far as you can, but I couldn't. And so I basically just fell out of the plane. And it's dark all around, you know, pitch black. And my first thought was, nobody's shooting. I haven't seen any tracers. I haven't heard any tracers. I'm not going to get shot out of the sky. And then right when that thought ended, I hit the ground. Boom. Wow. And then the next thought was, holy cow, this is so muddy. We had been told that it was raining there, but maybe my memory isn't correct because I was such a young private. I mean, I was a private, not even first class at the time, that when we hit, there was mud that was up to our knees or deeper. And so it was, okay, I'm on the ground. There's nobody shooting. I got to engage my night vision goggles, get my rifle in operation, and then somehow stand up and walk toward the assembly area. But all around me, because I could see with my night vision goggles, I saw the landing strip, and I saw a truck on the landing strip. And I saw some American soldiers. I could tell by their equipment they were American soldiers, and they were on the landing strip. But I could also tell that there were non-Americans that were wearing, head wraps. And instantly my thought was, oh my God, are they going to kill us? I was so scared of the local people that was my thought. I saw a village in the distance, and there was one little light. And I thought, oh my God, we need to destroy the village. Why are those people there? We need to kill those people. They're going to kill us. And it went from, I don't know if this is going to happen, to, oh my God, I'm going to get shot and killed, but I need to kill all of these people before they kill me. And that only lasted for a couple days, which was a long, stressful couple days internally, before I started learning more about, well, there's people on our side and there's people that are not on our side. But when I was able to, I cut my risers because I couldn't get them off. The risers are attached to the parachute, and I couldn't get them off. And I cut them off, and I remember getting all my gear ready, getting my rifle ready, and looking around at all these guys that were trying to stand and walk, because our rucks were heavy. But when you added the mud and the water to the bags, I don't know how much it weighed, and all the gear that we had on, the armor vest, knee pads, everything, helmet with our night vision goggles bouncing around on our head. I mean, it took all of that training physically for me, and some of the grit I have from growing up, to just stand up with that ruck on, and then to take the first step because the mud was sucking my foot down, and then, balance, and then take that next step. And thankfully, I don't know if it was because of my years as a skateboarder, snowboarder with some good balance, but I was able to slowly walk to the landing strip where a lot of the soldiers were using the landing strip, even though we were told not to, because it would make an easier target. But we didn't realize it was going to be so muddy. So I got to that landing strip, passing some people by who were like, help me. And I didn't know their voices. So I was like, dude, you're on your own, man. Like, people were sucking on the drop zone. And so once I got to that landing strip and I kept walking to my assembly area in the northwest or northeast corner, and I saw some of my own squad and my own platoon, or I heard their voices because it was all nighttime, night vision goggles, that weight of relief and self-satisfaction and confidence hit me of, oh my God, I can't believe I just completed that first mission, which was to safely parachute, find my assembly area, and then get in a position of overwatch with my guys, because there were a lot of people who didn't make it. And I don't mean they died on the drop zone, but they couldn't move either from injuries or from the weight, that they slept overnight in their position rather than being able to make their assembly area. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was a wild experience.
Yeah, it sounds it. But thank you for sharing that, because that's really detailed, and I kind of felt I was there. So it's really cool that you're very good at telling this story. Not a story, but it's your life. So you get in. I'm guessing like tensions like calm down a little bit because you know the area now. And how long? What's the duration that you are over in Iraq for that period?
That first year, my first deployment, I was there for 11 months and 16 days, or 11 and a half. I don't know if I can round up or down, but it wasn't quite a year. And that whole time it was every day was, are we going to leave? Those first 3 months, it was, okay, we were just living in the backs of our trucks, sleeping on the ground, shivering because we're not prepared for the cold, and doing patrols in some of these towns and villages. And finally got to the point where we were told, don't ask when we're going to leave, because nobody knows. And so we ended up being there. I didn't get leave. You know, we were there for the initial, I think I got a 3-day R&R to some lake that was in Iraq somewhere. But yeah, the rest of the time I was just, you know, frontline grunting it, sleeping in different safe houses, a lot of ambush, cordon and search. So, you know, surrounding towns and then searching every building. And yeah, that was my tour, the first tour.
Yeah. And when you were there doing that, you mentioned there being a frontline grunt or the front man. Was it what you expected when you were thinking about it, when you saw that guy that was up on the steps way back then? Was it what you thought and expected in reality?
No, I had no clue what I was getting myself into. You know, I had grown up playing some of those video games. You know, I remember there was one, it was called Conflict Desert Storm. You know, I see some of the students and stuff playing these games today, and I played those and thought, just like my other buddies who didn't sign up, oh, I could do that. That'd be cool. Or, oh man, you know, I'd be so good at that. And I didn't realize the emotional toil and physical toil of not being able to bathe, dry shaving, sleeping in the dirt without any real sleep because you're not only afraid, but you're cold and there's bugs, and missing your family, and then having to, you know, kick in door after door or just push them in and go into people's homes that were asleep in the middle of the night, shouting at them with my rifle up, pointed in their face, women without wraps on, and just invading people's privacy over and over. And then we'd do these traffic control points, which was not glamorous. It was, we'd set up concertina wire on a road, both sides traveling, you know, north to south. And then every vehicle that would come, take everybody out of the vehicle and search their vehicle. And we would stand out there in the blistering heat. I don't know if it was 130, 120, 140, whatever it was so hot. And we would just stand there searching people and, you know, pointing our rifle. And so having hundreds of people be afraid of me every day, not hundreds every day, over the course of that year really impacted me. It wasn't like I thought playing, you know, those games where it was like, oh, I know that I'm going and this is going to be the enemy. And I'm going to take down the enemy, and then I'm going to go back and regroup with my men, and then we're going to take down the enemy. This was, we don't know who the enemy is. We're trying to find the enemy, and we might be making enemies along the way. So there was so much more guerrilla warfare that was used against us with, I'm shooting in the direction of tracers, but I don't even see anybody. I don't know who shot at me. And then you're driving through that same town the next day and everybody's looking at you and you don't know who was it that shot at me, you know? So that feeling of paranoia that everybody was enemy was nothing like I imagined.
Yeah. Did you have a lot of contacts then? Was it regular?
You know, it's really hard to say if there was a lot, but yeah, I would say that we did make contact. I don't know how many times, you know, I didn't keep track, you know, dozens. No. I don't know.
Yeah. But enough for you to be aware of it, right? I mean, one time's enough, but yeah. So is there anything else? I'll give you like a final bit for this tour, this deployment. A standout moment, maybe a good one that you know stays in your mind.
Yeah, you know, I say this is a good one because it showed me the camaraderie and the brotherhood that I had while I was in, and this man who came down for me to help me out during that time is still like the one guy I stay in touch with today. And so this man, his name's Thomas Whitelow the third. He was a half black, half white guy from Hammond, Indiana. And we were in basic training together, like right next to each other in the bunks. We went to Airborne School together, and then we were sent to Italy together. And while we were in Italy, we were in different units. He was in Charlie Company, 1st of 508. I was in Alpha Company, 1st of 508. So we'd see each other sometimes, but we weren't next to each other fighting side by side. And so either way, that guy he was my brother. He was my boy. And there was one instance where my unit was living in a safe house in this town called Al Hawija. This was a very dangerous town where they were very pro-Saddam. You know, there were murals of Saddam all over. A lot of Republican Guard personnel were living there. And we would get a lot of contact while we lived there, you know, whether it was shots from a distance. Every day was fear while we lived in this safe house. And so there was one time where an informant had told us about a potential Republican Guard safe house outside of town where we were going to go to raid their house. We were going to do a raid. And so we all ramped up. My squad, which ended up being the dismount squad. So some of the other squads in our platoon, no, not in our platoon, in our company didn't have Humvees. They were always on foot. My platoon was the motorized platoon. So we were in Humvees that whole first year, sometimes doing foot patrols, but mainly doing mounted patrols. But my squad was the dismount squad, so we would get out of the Humvee and we would be the ones who would search something or flex cuff someone or whatever it was. And so this time, because we were the motorized squad or platoon, we were called to go do this raid. And so, of course, it's, it's just beginning to be light. We leave the safe house and, the sound of locking and loading as we drive out of there. We're ready to do this. Because we're in El Hawija, we're all highly on guard, looking out the backs of the vehicles, scanning our sectors. And we were tired. I feel like that whole first year I was tired. And so a lot of the times we would nod out. You're driving in the back of the Humvee and you have to wake each other up. Come on, man, we're on a mission. And I remember just kind of nodding out and my buddy being like, dude, wake up. My buddy was standing behind a 50 caliber that was mounted to the Humvee. And he's like, wake up. And then this other guy that I was with, he's snoring. We're like, dude, wake up, wake up. And we're driving through this village. Finally, we get out of the village and we're driving down the pitch black road. No lights, no nothing. And we're going towards where this suspected house is supposed to be to raid. And boom, unexploded ordnance, IED goes off, first vehicle. And by this point, they learned about daisy chaining. And so they would, place one at this spot and then the next one at 25 meters because they knew the distance we traveled in. And then the next one at 25, and they got more and more lethal. And I don't remember if this was daisy chained or not. I just remember that it was an IED, boom, goes off on the first vehicle. And right after that, they start firing from both sides, RPGs and small arms fire with tracers. And they're firing from both sides. We try to escape the kill zone. But the problem is the front vehicle had a popped tire and they had 2 casualties, not lethal, but 2 casualties that we didn't know if it would turn lethal. One guy's like his hand got kind of blown apart, if you will. And then the other guy had shrapnel in his rear and in his back. And so, there's a lot of blood and these guys got to get out of there. And the problem was we drive through that kill zone, but we had to turn around. And so we're turning around and on both sides we're being fired at, but we're also firing toward the tracers. Well, they end up finding out that we can see where they're shooting at us. So they stop shooting, but still we're just lighting them up. And we didn't dismount because we had to get out of there. I'm launching grenades. Everybody's firing in the direction where these tracers were. Well, as we turn around, that's a very sensitive spot because, there's whatever 3-point turns happening. And thankfully we're not being shot at anymore, but we're driving through that kill zone and just going so slow. Ends up that thankfully maybe a couple miles or a few miles away is Charlie Company's safe house. And they're up there. And we pull into Charlie Company's safe house. And as we get there, I can hear someone yelling, Stark, Stark, where's Stark, Stark, Stark? And it's Whitelow. And Whitelow comes up to me and he touches my shoulders, you know, and I'm pretty shocked. And he's like, Stark, Stark, are you hurt? Are you hurt? Are you okay? And I don't have much to say other than we got to get these guys out of here. And so, you know, boom, we're in. Let's get the litters. Let's get the casualties onto the litters and move them into the gymnasium because, you know, we got a medevac coming. They need their bleeding stopped, blah, blah, blah. And so we go through that effort, you know, and got blood on us, helping move these guys. And we end up going back to the trucks, you know, when they're in the gym and there's nothing I can do. It's in the hands of the medic. And Whitelow's there and he's talking to me. He's like, Stark, do you need any ammo? Do you need any more grenades? How are you doing? And I didn't have much to say, you know, I'm just like so shocked at what I was going through. And he's touching my grenade vest and he's counting and he's finding out, okay, you're short. He's touching my 5.56 magazines and he's finding you're short of ammo for both. And he runs off. He's like, I'll be right back, Stark. He runs off and he comes back. And when he comes back, he's got a grenade vest and he's got like 7 magazines and he gives them all to me. And he's like, this is for you. You guys are going to go back out there. And I was like, no, there's no way we're going to go back out there. We just had casualties. We need to take care of the casualties. And he's like, no, Stark, they're saying you guys are going to go back out there. And he was like, we were just watching the firefight from the roof and I can't believe what it looked like, but you got to get ready because you're going back. And so right then that word came out that the 3 vehicles that I was with, minus the one that was damaged with the pop tire, we're going to go back and we were going to find the people who injured our buddies. We were going to kill them. And at that point, when the word came down, a lot of the guys I was with started crying. You know, these are tough men. A boxer from New York City, Puerto Rican guy, you know, I mean, he beat up everybody crying. You know, people were crying. I wasn't crying, but the only reason I can say I wasn't crying is because Whitelow was there to give me that support, to give me those rounds, to tell me, you got this. You got to buck up, dude. You got to get those guys. And I was able, even though I was 18 and a brand new private, to come to the guys and be like, you guys, we got to go, man. We got to kill these guys. And we went back out there, shaking in our boots, man. That was one of the scariest moments. And I thank God that there was nobody. They were gone by that point. All we found was some wires, some det cord. But the people who were there had not been killed. They were nowhere to be found. No blood splatter, no nothing. And so I see that story not as an all negative. Of course, that was a tough time. But that brotherhood, Whitelow got in trouble for giving me those rounds because he didn't ask his leadership because they were someone else's rounds, but he didn't care. And that was the type of brotherhood that I had while I was in the military and that I still try to find, but it's not possible to find that out here.
Yeah. That's an amazing story. Yeah. And to, like you say, to have that camaraderie, that brotherhood, that gets you through some definitely difficult times. And you're so young. You're still 18. It's crazy. It's crazy.